Hey, what's up? This is Shane.
And this is Rory.
And this is Weencast.
Coming back at you.
This is going to be our part 2 of our amazing conversation with Kenny from Earfloss, a music history podcast from late last year. This is our complete conversation that we had with him, which was over 2 hours. So if you haven't listened to part 1, go back and listen to part 1. And this is the stunning conclusion.
Yes, please. Here's part 2. Enjoy, because we enjoyed it too.
Hey, this is Kenny with Earfloss, a music history podcast. Earfloss is a bi-weekly music history podcast where each episode, me and a co-host, usually Natalia, take an in-depth look at a different band or musician from all genres and all times. We go into their life, their career, their history, and we talk about their music. You can find Earfloss on Castbox at castbox.fm or wherever you listen to podcasts. Can't wait for you guys to hear it. Check it out. Earfloss, a music history podcast.
I'm Brian Colburn.
And I'm Jay Sweet.
And we're the co-hosts of Tune Styles, a podcast aimed at the music nerd in us all.
Each listener interactive episode hones in on a different musical topic or artist,
featuring guest interviews, listener polls, and roundtable discussions about the music that shaped the soundtrack to our lives.
You can find us at tunestylespodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, or wherever your favorite podcasts are found.
Subscribe to Tune Styles and be a part of our weekly musical conversation.
Stay tuned.
Well, and you mentioned something about the jam aspect of it, and that's kind of something that I've noticed too. Is not particularly with Ween's music, but with the jam scene in general. I feel like there's this relationship with Ween and the jam scene. I know that they've come out and they've been like, look, because I watched a couple interviews where they both were like, look, we're not a jam band, but I know that because I know a lot of people who listen to like a lot of jam music, and like the band Fish, they like to play a couple Ween songs on the regular.
Yes.
Well, let me just say, it's funny how you bring up the era of, we were talking about the Mollusk and even the country album before the Mollusk, because it's like that's when they start. I cringe to say this, but sort of like falling off the map in terms of like pop. And getting on the charts and whatnot. Yeah, they're still showing up in, movies and like South Park because they're collaborating with other people and artists who appreciate them, you know what I mean? And can respect them as musicians and that kind of thing. But as like the albums are sort of, not really getting picked up by, the mainstream media, the live show between 1994 and 1999 or 2000 is just exploding. So they would put together the 5-piece band that they would come to be and remain to this day right around, I would say, like between 95 and 96 when the country album tour is, and then shortly thereafter. So it's just the 5 guys now. So it's just Gina, Diener, Claude, Glenn, and Dave. And like I can at least say for my own experience, the second, third, fourth show that we went to see that I saw, were just absolutely incredible. So like that's when you start seeing like, okay, these guys are able to just fucking jam this shit out because they're really starting to like groove and meld together and get it like on point. So that's when you start seeing like, okay, the LMLYP from God, Ween, Satan, which is 8 minutes long, becomes like a half hour, and that's how they're going to close out the show. And it's just a fucking crazy, insane jam where everyone
takes
a
whole set on its own.
Yeah, where everyone takes like a crazy long solo. And, so that's, I think, when they start getting some of that reputation as, jam band friendly, if you will, not necessarily a jam band, like
jam band,
jam
band adjacent.
Yeah, right.
Adjacent.
Yes.
Something like that. The one thing I will say, and I'm I'm a Fish fan. You know what I mean? I'm not ashamed of it. You know, that's my two favorite bands are Ween and Fish. Although I will always wear a Ween shirt to a Fish show. Always. That's my, that's my rule. But if you're,
I think I've seen you. I think I've seen you there.
I'll be one of maybe like 10 people wearing the Ween shirt. But like, the one thing I will say about like the jam band crowd, the jam band scene is, the majority of the people, they're very open-minded to different kinds of music. And I think that that's one of the things that Ween appeals to them, because it is so different and it is so unique. So I think that's one of the things that, those people sort of like, pick up on Ween or latch onto Ween, not just because they jam out, just because they're open-minded and they're into different types of music, if that's fair.
Yeah.
If I can take over on this, Shane, and Shane knows where I'm going to go with this probably, but so to just, the first thing is, there's usually about 4 to 6 or something like that songs that they really jam out per show, give or take. Because they'll have a lot of short songs, but they absolutely will have some song, like a handful of songs per show that are 10 to 20 minutes long or whatnot, where they do jam it out. So they're absolutely jam adjacent, I think is a really cool way of putting it. But the relationship is interesting because, well, first off, for me, I'm not a Fish fan. I don't have any problem with Fish per se. But I've never really been into Fish, but I respect Fish. I think they're amazing musicians, amazing live performers. For the record, my wife was at the New Year's show in Florida, so there's a lot of lineage for me with adjacent to Fish.
It's awesome.
But so she was in that 24-hour traffic jam and all that. But the relationship between Fish and Ween has not always been the most sort of, I don't know if cordial is the right word. So when Chocolate and Cheese came out, Ween didn't really play the song Roses Are Free. They just, that wasn't a song they played. I guess they didn't feel like they could really play it live because the way it was produced and the way they recorded it on the album, they did until they had a 5-piece band. I guess they didn't feel like they could really make the song live. And so Fish came along. And Fish says, we're going to give this band respect. This song's cool. We like this song. So we're going to start playing Roses Are Free. And so it's interesting because one of my memories of sharing Ween with people or sharing Ween with friends is I have a distinct memory of playing Chocolate and Cheese or playing Roses Are Free and having people say to me, "Oh, that's a Fish song." And that's always rubbed me the wrong way.
I'm sure.
That people just thought it was a Fish song. And I always wondered, like, was Fish not telling people it's a Ween song? Like, why are these Fish fans not knowing that it's a Ween song? And so I was always correcting people. And interestingly, and this is documented, so it's not just me. Diener actually at one point says, now I'm paraphrasing, but he basically says, "Fuck it, we're taking Roses Are Free back. We're taking it back." And then then Ween started playing Roses Are Free live, almost because I think they were getting the same shit that I was getting, where people were all thinking it was a Fish song. I also have to say, and I got to get this in there, and I apologize to you guys because I know you're both into Fish. But there is the live album of Fish, and I watched it. And Shane, you got to help me out with the name of that. It's the Farmhouse,
it's Bittersweet Motel. It's the documentary.
Bittersweet Motel.
Yeah.
And Bittersweet Motel features one of the songs they play on that is Roses Are Free. And I have to tell you, nowhere on that movie box or description does it give Ween credit for that song.
It probably has their like actual names in the credits or something like that, but it probably doesn't actually say Ween on it at all.
I'm just laying that out for you that I don't think there's anywhere, even if you watch the movie, I don't think anywhere does it say it's a Ween song. So
This is
I'm
how
just gonna
this
put
Ween,
that out there.
This is how this Ween versus Fish conversation always goes. It's the Fish kids going, "Yeah, Ween's awesome," and it's the Ween kids going, "Man, fuck those guys."
Hey, man, I apologize.
No,
We talked about this on our podcast a couple of times. But, there is not a lot of things that Fish covers, and they still will play Roses Are Free on like a regular basis. It's not just something they did like a handful of times. It might not show up like every tour, but, probably like between like a summer tour, it'll turn up at least like once, right?
I'm surprised they haven't put it on an album.
Oh, well, I mean,
Well, it's on
basically
Bittersweet Motel.
everything that Fish does, you can get like the next day, or you know what I mean.
Right.
It's every live show is available either streaming or download for a couple bucks. But there isn't really a lot of things.
You just gotta have your stubs, man.
Yeah, right. Get the stub, right. But there isn't really a lot of stuff that Fish has done by their like contemporaries. I mean, they just haven't. There's a lot of tunes that they do that are like, classic rock tunes or stuff from like the 80s, but someone who is from like the 90s, like they are, rose up and was a working band through, like the early 90s, like Ween, there just isn't that many songs that Fish does like that. So it is kind of like a nod to them, and it is kind of like a thing, out of respect for Ween and just how much they, love that song, I guess, because they continue to bust that out,
And I have to say that undoubtedly, the Fish covering that song helped Ween's popularity.
Oh, of course.
Oh, for sure.
But I want to take this conversation a few years further into the future, because this is everything I'm describing as far as we're going to take this back and all that. This is back in the 90s. And I don't think there's bad blood between the bands. I think Diener loves to fuck around, and maybe for a little bit there was some sort of frustration and whatnot. But I don't think there's. I don't want to speak for Ween, but I don't think there's bad blood between the bands. But I will say something I noticed as a fan of Ween, going to shows, through the years, that when Fish goes on hiatus, and there was, I think, a noticeable uptick in people showing up at Ween shows.
Interesting.
Especially when Fish did when they had the long breakup. They had the hiatus first, and then they had the breakup a few years later. When that breakup happened, my personal experience going to shows, venues started getting bigger. Some of the venues they were playing in started being bigger amphitheaters. That they didn't play in as often earlier. I started noticing more and more people that sort of didn't look as much like Ween fans at the shows. More people that didn't really know the songs, but they were there because the band they love wasn't playing at the time. And so that's also, for me, and I'm just being honest, it's a little bit of a touchy subject, because on the one hand, I'm glad that Ween got more exposure and more fans and bigger shows, and that was cool. But it was also felt, and this is me as a younger person, I suppose, it felt a little bit, if I'm that pretentious Ween head that Shane talked about at the beginning of this podcast, it felt a little bit off-putting to have, who are all these people showing up and you can't even sing along to the song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
But absolutely, there was this uptick in at least I feel that was true, that there was this uptick in, Fish was no longer playing, and Fish heads, obviously you guys know that Fish heads are famous for going on tour with the band and going to dozens of shows every summer, if not, more than that. And suddenly you have this vacuum where, man, what am I going to do? I don't have anything to go do. So let's go check out Ween.
Let's go check out Ween. Yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't even thought of that, but I can see that for sure.
Yeah, I'll agree.
So it's interesting, that relationship anyway. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. It is an interesting relationship, and I'm glad we touched on it, because of any music genre or any music scene that I've been in throughout the years, it's been the jam band scene. And most of my friends, at least my musical friends, are pretty into Ween, but most of them at least are pretty into the jam scene as well. And I feel like it's good to bring up because it plays into the idea that Ween is this phenomenon that is specific to themselves, and they don't really fit in here, and they don't really fit in there. They're kind of, not even kind of, they definitely stand on their own 2 feet, and they have their, they don't need a scene to carry them, or they don't need a larger following that is of fans that is not of their own, if that makes any sense.
I completely agree. You asked early on, how do you describe Ween? And sometimes I just go and say Ween is Ween. And there's no other way to describe it. And I think you're right. There is this sense of Ween can stand on an island unto itself. And from my own personal experience, like I was saying, I've gone to see the Dead. I've gone to see Dylan. I've been to some shows, but mostly I just want to go see Ween. Like, that's just what I'm about. Like, if Ween's on tour, I'm going to go see him if I can.
It's always my first priority. There's no other band that I
feel that way about.
That's definitely the show I want to go to the most is the Ween show. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I've never seen a Ween show, and not knowingly, and they're definitely on my top 5 list of shows that I want to go see.
Well, let me chime in real quick here. I know that you're out on the West Coast, and I could say, like, being into Ween since the mid to late 90s, I will say we were very lucky to be in the Northeast because there was a lot of shows that they played in, like, the Philadelphia area, New York, New Jersey. So we were kind of spoiled there for a long time. I mean, the West Coast shows, I think even still to this day, are pretty sporadic. I mean, when they were on like a full blown, world tour or album tour for, like, the Mollusk or White Pepper or something like that, they'd be out west, but, like, there were so many more East Coast and Northeast shows that we were able to hit up. So it's tough if you're a West Coaster, I think, even still to this day.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's like that especially in the jam band scene, and again, Ween is not in the jam band scene, but not even for the jam band scene, there's just, depending on where a band is from, they're obviously going to play most of their shows in the area and region that they're from, with a couple exceptions, but especially in the early days when they're trying to get out there. I wanted to talk to you guys about, so they put out a couple more albums. We talked about the Mollusk, and White Pepper was in 2000, and it's the last one that they do with Elektra. Let me ask you this. Do you guys know what happened with Elektra? Do you guys know why this was the last one with Elektra?
Well, I mean, if you kind of like, sort of like what we were talking about there, if you look at sort of like the writing on the wall, they never, to a record label, especially a big one like Elektra, they probably at that point were just like, okay, well, the 90s are over. These guys have never really, hit it for us in such a way that, we're all happy about, and, this and that. Yeah, I mean, they had some moderate, mainstream success, but, I would say by the time White Pepper comes out, it's like music is going a completely different direction. You got like the boy bands thing, and the, Britney Spears, and like that real like bubblegum pop and like that sort of scene. And it's like, I guess, to Elektra, they were probably like, this, alternative wave or whatever you want to call it is over, but.
And after Chocolate and Cheese, I mean, let's, again, Golden Country Greats and the Mollusk, you got a country album and then this crazy sea shanty album. Elektra's got to be thinking, like, what the hell did we get ourselves into? They just wanted a couple more Chocolate and Cheeses.
Oh yeah, because that's how that works. They want their monkeys to keep cranking them out.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just going to go with whatever is, hot at the time. And I think it was just sort of, okay, well, we gave this thing a shot, or whatever. And it never, like I said, it never really like hit in any kind of, real way or whatever. Maybe in an alternative scene or a college radio kind of way, but that's about it. And yeah, I think probably the whole, digital thing was starting to get off the ground, so that didn't help matters. Who knows? I mean, I think that wouldn't really start hitting until maybe like 2001, 2002 that, bands are just getting dropped left or right. But I think also there's enough of a time span there between Pure Guava and White Pepper, and I think Diener even talks about it in a couple of the interviews. The company had probably changed hands a couple of times. So now you got a different wave of people who are running Elektra, and it's not the people who, signed Ween in the first place and the people who like backed Ween. So that in my opinion, I would guess that was probably a big part of it too. It's like, these aren't our guys. We're a completely different company now. That sort of thing, I'm sure took place too.
But I will say, Shane, looking back and thinking back to my college era, dude, my roommates were all about Napster, and that was like 2000, so it's all right around that time period. Man,
Sure.
I
Yeah.
had roommates that just had their computers downloading music 24/7.
Yeah,
they would
just all
just
the
set it up
time.
to download all week, and they would just be downloading. I had a friend who who Metallica came after. The old infamous Metallica, like threatening lawsuits against individual fans. I had a
Yep.
friend, one of my roommates, who Metallica came after because they just set their computer to download everything. So that was right around. That was definitely that time period. So
Well, speaking of that, didn't La Cucaracha, the last studio album, didn't they stream that on their social media, on their Facebook or whatever, or their I guess it would have been MySpace. I read somewhere that when La Cucaracha came out, before they released it, they were streaming it on their social media for people to just pick up. And
Well, I don't know about streaming for La Cucaracha, but before that, and I think it would have been like in between Quebec and La Cucaracha, if I'm not mistaken, they did what was called All Request Live, which was basically them just streaming themselves live and made an album out of it. So it was one of the things that they released themselves on their own record label, which is Choco Dog Records. And it's basically sort of like a mix of songs, some from, I guess it was to promote Quebec. So that's the album that comes before La Cucaracha, because I think those were new at the time.
2003.
Yeah. Okay.
2003,
So
yeah.
so it's like I don't know if that's maybe what you're thinking of, or that's what you're referring to, but I will say, they use the internet a lot to their advantage also. We're right away just
Yeah.
cutting right to like the gloom and doom part of it, but like they were one of the bands who really like sort of embraced like, okay, this is how we can connect with our people. And they're
Yeah.
again rabid fan base, and that was one of the things that you could go on, this is really early in terms of like the streaming thing, Weenradio, and just listen to
Yeah, dude.
random
Oh.
Ween songs, on your computer. That was really cool at the time.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Shane, because I was totally just about to go there. And Ween had Weenradio, and it was basically just 24/7 streaming Ween and Ween-related side projects and whatnot. And I believe one of the years, and you know what, I don't remember the magazine, what the hell, but it totally got like ranked like, third best technological innovation of the year, or like internet
I
innovation.
think it was.
I'm
it was.
shitting you.
It was
I'm
Rolling.
shitting you
It was
not.
Rolling Stone. Rolling Stone ranked it
And-
third best music radio station.
Yes.
Awesome,
Thank you,
dude.
Kenny. Thank you for backing me up, because I was hoping, because otherwise people probably think I'm full of shit.
I didn't remember
Absolutely.
that, but that's really awesome.
They were. It was like ranked like the third of that year. Like that was how innovative they were, and they were, so. So yeah, dude. I mean, that's awesome how they were already reaching fans, and so that helps bridge them from the, going from Elektra to their own label, and then beyond, with the, they have Weenradio, and so they already had a way to get to their fans directly that people were eating up. And we used to hang out and just listen to that and be like, "Oh, put on the Weenradio."
Yeah, and one of the
That's
things
rad.
that was really cool about that is you could see how many other people were listening to it at the same time you were. I remember one of my buddies, at college, was just like, "Oh yeah, the other night I was on and there were 6 people on," So just that, like,
That's awesome.
early, way early, like, streaming era. It was really fun.
Well, so what's going on? What's going on in the band at this time? So we talked about Quebec in 2003, and then La Cucaracha, which is their last studio album in 2007. Can you guys maybe hopefully I'm sure you do. Why is that their last album? And did they officially break up then, or what's going on personally with them?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. A lot of kind of stuff is going on. So Quebec comes out in 2003. Looking back, you will notice that the longest they go up to that point between albums is from White Pepper to Quebec. I guess the same is true for the Mollusk, but you got 3 years anyway between White Pepper and Quebec. And they have their popular, we talked about the popular appeal in the mid to later 90s as a peak of that popular appeal. But as a band, as the 5-piece band that was formed basically after Golden Country Greats and for the Mollusk and for the Mollusk tour and beyond, so the live performance really hits its peak in at least for that time period, definitely the early 2000s. And we talk about April 20th, 2000 show at Rutgers, New Jersey as being the best show that we've ever seen, and really a high watermark. And then when I reflect back on that, after that point, so you have a series of things that start to happen with the band. Claude Coleman gets in a serious car accident in the summer of August of 2002, I believe. And so he's actually out of the band until mid 2003, and then in also right around that time, a little before that, Glenn takes a hiatus from the band. Shane and I both have gone back and forth. We're not exactly sure on the details. Like, we're not sure if he was upset about the band or what was going on, but he takes a hiatus in between White Pepper and Quebec. So Quebec actually ends up being a fair amount of old material from kind of far back in the day that they weren't writing a lot of material really at that time. After Quebec, Aaron actually, in 2004, they had to cancel a tour because, and this was, so Quebec comes out in 2003 and they're touring for Quebec, and then they start to do a festival kind of season. And this is documented. Aaron has had struggles with drugs and the rock and roll lifestyle. And so in 2004, they actually cancel the tour, and he goes into rehab. And so the band for almost a whole year kind of goes on pause, right? And so this is all happening now, like at this point it's post-Quebec, and so this is now, and then, starting to lead up to, they get back together, but then you're leading up to La Cucaracha. And one of the things that when I look back at La Cucaracha, I love the album. I love every Ween album, but one of the things that Shane and I talk about is La Cucaracha, it's not as strong as an album, and there's really just a few great songs on it. I compare it a little bit to the Beatles' Let It Be, if I may be so bold, in the sense that when you listen to Let It Be, you can almost hear the strain of the Beatles. At least that's my perception of it when I listen to it. I obviously don't go back that far, so I didn't live through it, but I listened to it, and you can almost feel like it's not there anymore. The magic's not there. And I feel like you can feel that on La Cucaracha a little bit, that the magic isn't really there. And that is La Cucaracha's 2007, I believe. Is that correct? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah. Yep. 2007.
And so after that, you know, they continue to tour, but and Shane, you kind of back me up on this. You start to see a lot more of the solo projects popping up. They start to tour less and do a lot more of their solo stuff. I know that I remember in that time period that I was going to see as many Gene Ween shows as I was Ween shows at that time, because that was what was available to me, so I was going out to check it out. And so there definitely was, you know, whether they were talking it through together all the time or if it was always just under wraps, you look back and you can see that there was sort of definitely a few years where it was really dicey leading up to the breakup. And Shane, I don't know if you want to kind of jump in and talk about the breakup or talk about
since you're
time period.
Since you're talking about touring, this is something that I saw in the Wikipedia, and this is something that I wasn't familiar with. I saw it in the Wikipedia, and I kind of pulled up some of the sources that they cited. But in 2011, it looked like they had something happen at a Vancouver show. It looked like I didn't really get too far into it. Do you guys know much about that? It looked like there was some sort of...
So basically, it's sort of like the infamous like Jeaner meltdown. He sings about that in one of his solo songs on the album called Freeman. So basically,
yes.
I mean,
which is a great solo album.
Great album, yeah. But the first track sort of like references that show, and you know, it's more or less like he's just a little too far gone to, you know, perform the show that night, and you know, I don't think I've ever really sat down and listened or watched. I remember at the time there was a couple of videos, and he does look pretty bad. And you know, I think, you know, they play basically what they have to, and the rest of the band just kind of walks off. And Jeaner plays 2-3 songs just by himself. And it's really hard to listen to, and it's really hard to watch, because you can see that, you know, he's really struggling at that point. And you know, that's one of the things that I think led up to, you know, what happened. And that's basically them, you know, taking some time apart and him, you know, getting healthy again. You know, which was great, and it needed to happen, and you know, they're all better for it.
There's the lyric from the solo album is for a while I couldn't play my guitar like a man, is one of the lyrics, one of the lines that really hits me. This is a tough time period that we're getting into for this discussion as fans, and to respect and, you know, love, you know, Aaron and Mickey as, you know, I don't know them, but as people and as musicians, and people have been a big part of my life. This is a difficult time, and so when that solo album came out and looking back and really having that kind of touch you, in, you know, like really give you the feels, you know, and like realizing that he is going through all of that. When the breakup happened, you know, I definitely know that a lot of fans were very conflicted. And so maybe this is a good time to, you know, well, let's just go right into that. So the breakup, more or less, Aaron unilaterally broke the band up in a Rolling Stone interview. And Mickey is on record as saying that it was kind of news to him, that you know, he hadn't heard anything about it, and Aaron just sort of just dropped the hammer and said, you know what, Ween is no more. And a lot of fans just, you know, first off, we're all upset because we want to see more live Ween, and are we going to get to see Ween again? And then also this sense of, man, why did he have to do that? Just go out there and break the band up without even talking to the other band members. And then all feeling for the other band members and also the fans, you know, just trying to figure out what's going on, all the while wanting to be understanding of Aaron, who was going through a lot of issues with drugs, and breaking up with Ween for him was very much about getting away from from those drugs and that scene and trying to break from that. So you didn't want to be hating on Aaron, but at the same time there were just so many emotions going through everyone's minds at that time. And
so after that happened, is that when Aaron went and sought treatment for his struggles with drugs?
It was probably like the second or third time. As fans, we're not really sure, but that was one of the periods. I mean, but it was the main time where you can see, like, after he came back, it was like, okay, he doesn't go back to that, like, hard lifestyle again. You know what I mean? Like, he's been healthy, like, ever since, as far as I know and can tell. And, like I said, he's better off for it. You know what I mean? He's, he looks great. He still sounds great. One of the things that Rory is referencing to, now we mentioned the album Freeman, but the thing that came before that and right around the time of this Rolling Stone article is an album called Marvelous Clouds, which is billed as Aaron Freeman, Marvelous Clouds. I actually love the album, and I know there's a good fan base for it, but I think at the time it just rubbed a lot of the Ween fans the wrong way, because it's such a departure from that sort of like fuck you rock of Ween. So it's almost like a 1-2 punch. It's like, okay, here's Aaron. He's just broken up Ween by basically saying, like, yeah, I'm just not in Ween anymore, and that's it. And then releasing this album, it's not songs that are written by him. There's songs of Rod McEwen. And again, it's like, it's cool. And
what does it sound like?
It's very like AM radio. It's very
it's more of poetry rock put to soft rock.
Right. Again, I happen to love it. It's a really different record than pretty much anything from Ween. And I think it was just so it was just such a departure, like I said, from what the fans have come to know and love. And here he is laying this on everyone. And it's like, I think a lot of people were just really turned off and just sort of like, what the fuck is this? And, it didn't really work. It didn't really fly. I think he was like, well, I could just be my own solo artist and this is what I want to do. And it's like, yeah, you could be your own solo artist, but now you're going to lay this on us? And it just didn't really seem to, like, get any legs. You know what I mean? If that's fair.
If I could cut in a little bit. So they basically took 2011 off. Most of 2011, if you're a fan, he has his meltdown, and then they basically take the rest of the year off. And so fans are wondering, are we going to when's Ween coming back? We're itching for it. And then it's middle of 2012 that he's getting the Marvelous Clouds thing going on, and he breaks up the band in Rolling Stone on May 29, 2012. And then it's this Marvelous Clouds. And for me, I know when I read that article, the interview, it just seemed to me like he was getting this press for Marvelous Clouds, and he just kind of thought it was going to be this big thing or something, that I got this thing going on and I don't need Ween, I'm out, and it just really, when I read the interview, I just felt like there was this, and I realized that he spent all that time, either was in rehab for some of it and just getting clean, but feeling this personal anger and antagonism towards Ween because of the rock and roll scene that was contributing to his demise, to his addictions and his troubles. But there also, part of it just seemed like it was like, oh, Rolling Stone is interviewing me for my own personal project, so I'm gonna take this moment to say Ween's done because look at me, the biggest rock and roll magazine in the world is interviewing me for a solo project. So that's kind of what it felt like at the time as a fan. And to echo what Shane was saying, it's not Ween music, and so if you're expecting that, you're not going to get it. But we went to see Aaron for the Marvelous Clouds tour in Philadelphia, and man, I gotta tell you, in your run sheet you talk about failures, and I put some of my own notes on my own document, and there's very few things listed under failures, but I gotta tell you, Marvelous Clouds is one of them. And this is why I'll say that, because we went to that show and there was no one in that audience. The venue was I'm blanking on the name of the venue. I could look it up on my list in a second. But
World Cafe Live, probably.
Yes, thank you. World Cafe Live, and they have a few different stages in that. It's a few different venues within that venue. A few different stages, but it's a pretty big venue, medium-sized venue with a nice balcony, and I had actually gotten like the club seats so I could have dinner and watch them from the club seats, and they had people standing at the stairs where you had to show them your wristband to get upstairs and blah blah blah. There might have been 20 people in that venue.
Oh,
30,
crazy.
40. I mean, it was so empty. The people working there were all like, there might have been more people working the venue than actually watching the show. And I don't think I'm exaggerating very much.
That's crazy.
And he didn't have the songs memorized. He had all the sheet music, and he was reading everything off of sheet music. And it was just really dissonant, like, moment where it's like, wow, man, no one is coming here, and he doesn't even have the songs memorized.
The other thing I'll just throw in here real quick. The other thing was he was doing a lot of shows at the time as just either Gene Ween or just like Aaron Freeman by himself with acoustic guitar, or he's doing his own solo shows. And I think it was like, okay, well, we just saw him do, his show. So what is this thing going to be? I'd have to go back and look at the dates again, but it couldn't have been more than, 6 months from the last time he was at World Cafe in Philly just doing his own show. So it's like, how many times are you going to play just like, what we think is going to be Gene Ween by himself and have, it's like it's already not going to be as big of a crowd as a Ween crowd. And then how many people are going to come see it? Like, again, I guess a lot of people probably didn't realize it was a different show because it's like the Marvelous Clouds, tour and show to support that album. But it's just too much of the same thing. I think that it suffered from that a lot too.
June 21st, 2012 is the World Cafe Live show. And World Cafe Live booked Aaron Freeman, I believe, as Gene Ween. And he was booked before he broke up the band. And so they booked him
right
with a venue and the expectation that it was basically Ween, but a solo version. And that's not what they got. And you're right, Shane. So we watched a Gene Ween in New Hope, Pennsylvania at a winery in November of 2011. So that's still during the, they hadn't officially broken up yet. And then we also saw them earlier in 2011 in April at the World Cafe Live. So you're absolutely right on, dude. You have a good memory. I'm cheating with my notes. And yeah, so in just over a year, we had seen 2 Gene Ween shows, and then we went to see Aaron Freeman. And it was, and then that was the first one after the actual official breakup.
So after they get back together, the breakup happens after the last album. So, but they're back together currently, right? Are they still touring? They
announced the reunion, February 12th, 2016 was the first show back, and they announced a reunion show. At first, it was just meant to be 2 shows. They quickly added a third one at that venue in Colorado. where they had that's where they had the reunion. And at first, it was just meant to be, these are our 3 reunion shows. They were fantastically, wildly popular in terms of they sold out really fast. They were jam-packed with fans. And then once those shows happened, they started adding more reunion shows.
Oh, cool.
So they have no plans to do any new music, and they only tour sporadically. So are they back together? Sort of. But only as a part-time touring band. I mean, they're doing less than 10 shows a year at this point, Shane. You can help me out on that, but it's just here and there. It's very spotty. And they'll just do like 2 or 3 shows at a venue and then move on. That's what they did with the Golden Country Greats. They had, I think it was 2 shows in Nashville. After the 3 shows in Colorado, they announced 3 shows at the Terminal in New York City, or the Terminal 5. Mm-hmm. And we actually got to see one of those. But even when that happened, that was like all it was. And then they kind of decided that, you know what, we are going to keep doing this on a part-time basis. I think, as sad as this may sound, it's all about the Benjamins, you don't make a lot of money as a musician unless you're super, super famous. And when they saw how much they could make off a few reunion shows, they started doing more. And I'll tell you what, I'm not saying that to be disrespectful. It's all good, because I want them to make a living, and I love their music. So I am more than happy to go see them play. Mm-hmm. But I think that's just the reality of it. The first few shows back, I remember the Terminal 5 show we saw, and this is April of 2016. Aaron and Mickey barely looked at each other on stage.
Oh, that's crazy.
It was very, very kind of dicey. I mean, it was an awesome show. It was a great show, but they barely even looked at each other on stage. So it was very much of a like, all right, let's get together and play this, and make money.
It makes you wonder what's happening with them. It makes you wonder, what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, it's nobody's business but theirs, but it makes you wonder.
Yeah. Yeah, in all due respect, for sure. And I would say that since then, we've been to a few more shows, and I think that the relationship has warmed up more.
Yeah.
They're definitely more friendly and cordial on stage now than they were at that initial moment.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely gotten better. But
yeah.
I'm sorry, Shane, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say the exact same thing. I think things have warmed up a lot in the last few years. One of the things that is really cool, and I think this is one of the things how the jam band scene has sort of latched onto them, is it's always been a different show each night. That's one of the things that they've taken from like the jam band example of, okay, if you went to see these guys in 1999 2 nights in a row, you're going to see 2 different shows. Now there might be some overlap of songs, but it's going to be a different show every night. You know what I mean? And I think it's always been a smart way to do things when you're on tour, and you get a good mix, and people will continue to come see you as long as they're having fun and enjoying the shows. So one of the things that's nice about these reunion shows is, they played 3 nights in Colorado when they first came back, and then 3 nights in New York, and that's sort of how they've been doing it over the last couple years. They'll play either 2 nights in a row at the same venue, or 3 nights in a row at the same venue, and there's no repeat songs. You can go all 3 nights and hear a completely different show each night. And again, that is sort of set in the example of, Phish. Phish does the same thing. They're going to play, on their summer tour, they're going to play it in Camden for 2 nights or whatever it is, and it's going to be 2 completely different shows. No song overlap, no repeats. So that is really cool. And I mean, when we went to see them in New York City in 2016, when they first came back, I mean, we saw the first night of those 3 nights. I mean, it was just like random gem after gem after gem. I mean, it was just
rarities.
Yeah, just insane rarities, because they had mapped out, you could tell they had mapped out all 3 nights. And, some of the shit was pretty fucking rare. You know what I mean? So that's one of the things that's been really cool about it. We could sit here and say like, they're just out to make a buck again or whatever, but they are putting in the effort to make those shows good and unique and fun, I think, So it's been good.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I will also just point out, in deference to Aaron, when you do 3 shows in a row at one venue, it takes out the touring aspect of that.
Right.
And I know that we all want to be sensitive to the fact that we want to listen to Ween live, but we don't want to put Aaron back in a situation where he might, I don't want him to get off the wagon or whatever, I want him to be healthy and happy and do what's right for him.
Totally.
So to me, I'm looking at that and saying, well, that's a way for them to knock out a few shows and mix it up without having to put Aaron on tour, which I know that I think he's leery of that, because that's the rock and roll lifestyle, and that's what can tempt you and can put you in that spot to make a bad choice. So
for sure. And
I also just want to quick add that, I don't want to come across as overly critical at any moment. Some of this, I'm sharing as a fan and trying to be honest as a fan, while also trying to, be respectful and caring. But it's conflicted, I would be lying if there weren't a lot of different emotions going on at different times.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough. One of the other things I think that's kind of cool, since they've been back together is, they've been like festival headliners basically. And I think that's another way, like you said, it kind of cuts out some of the travel. It's just we'll just go and play this festival. They're only on for one night, or whatever. The shit's already set up and ready to go. And, they don't have to have their road crew or whatever, bring the whole circus along with them. The shit's already ready to go. And, people will come see them. People will come, and have Ween as one of the headliners of one of the nights of, that particular festival. They played Riot Fest this year. They played the Desert Days Festival, and they're more or less the biggest act, of the night. You know what I mean? So that's really cool too. And it's another way that, they can get back out there and, also make new fans. That's a great way to pick up new people, is playing those bigger festivals.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely. They and that keeps the demand up. When there's only a few shows, people really want to go see them. And I have to say, along with what Shane said with the new fans, I've been noticing a lot of fans so young that they were not alive when I started seeing Ween. And so it's a whole new generation of people checking out Ween now. And that's only true because there was that long period where it was several years of a breakup and the law and all of that. So you really do have a new generation that's getting immersed in it and getting to experience Ween, which I think is wonderful and awesome.
Totally.
Well, we're getting about to the end of the time here. We should probably wrap it up. I don't know if there's anything else that we didn't cover that we should get to. We've kind of gotten to the end of my research. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to touch on that you don't think we touched on?
I guess the only thing that I would say, and if I could plug our podcast for a minute, is I absolutely love going back and listening to some of the old shows. And that's kind of like what our podcast started as, and that's kind of like what we're about is, it doesn't have to be something that's going on now. Go back and listen to an old show. Because like I said, between 94 and, 2000 or so, they were just on fire. And there are just so many great shows from that era that, are just incredible. And, go back and listen to an old show. If you're a new fan, old fan, check out an old show.
Well, you should tell people where they can find you, because I know you did it at the top of the show, but I just want to make sure people are able to find you. So say the name of your podcast and tell everybody where they can find you on all the socials.
So it's Weencast Podcast. We're on basically every regular podcast platform: iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. I also make a YouTube video for every one of our episodes. If you're down with just audio on YouTube, I always make a YouTube video. We have a Facebook page and a Facebook group, so it's just Weencast Podcast for both. On Twitter at Weencast Podcast. Hit us up on email. Same thing, weencastpodcast@gmail.com. So we try to make that basically the title for everything. There's also an Instagram, but we haven't really done much with that. So
yeah,
we're working it.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. Patreon, we have a Patreon as well. So it's patreon.com/Weencast Podcast. We have some stickers. Which are, I just love them. I think they're the greatest thing. Rory took the lead on making some stickers, and I think they're just the shit. So if you want to get a sticker, you can Patreon us. Hey, $1. You know what I mean? What's $1 a month? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Toss something in the tip cup for sure.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
And we'll send some your way, Kenny. We'll send some.
Yeah, Kenny gets hooked up for
stickers.
Sure.
Oh hell yeah, man! I'll put them all over. I'll put them on my banjo. I'll put them on my banjo case.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Nice banjo. I want to just say, I so appreciate you inviting us on and having an opportunity to chat about Ween for a couple hours. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground and a lot of like big topics, but only scratched the surface. I always feel like that when I'm in a Ween conversation. That you take any part of this conversation and we could have blown that out for 2 hours each.
Oh, hell yeah.
It's just a pleasure, man. And, so it's been real talking with you. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you guys coming on, Rory and Shane, seriously, from Weencast Podcast. And we'll have to do it again. And I don't like to invite myself on other people's podcasts, but I'll roll on by your guys' show anytime you want to have me.
We'll figure out a reason that you can be on, and we'll absolutely make that happen at some
well,
point. Maybe we can talk about fish. Maybe we can have a fish conversation.
Yeah, man.
And I'll do my best to be.
I would love that.
Antagonistic.
I would love that.
Well, no, bring it on, man. And I'm Kenny with Earfloss, a music history podcast, and you can find us on all the socials as well. We're at Earfloss Pod on most of the socials, Facebook. Search it out. You guys know how to navigate social media. And we also have a Patreon if you are interested in tossing a couple bucks in the tip cup. It's patreon.com/Earfloss. And we really appreciate you guys swinging by and checking out the show. And we will catch y'all next time.
Hi, I'm Leah.
And I'm Beth Ann.
And we're She Will Rock You.
She Will Rock You is a bi-weekly podcast about rock history.
Each episode, we talk about an artist and their lives, but we do it a little differently.
You see, we noticed there was a lack of ladies hosting music podcasts,
so we wanted to fix it.
And here we are, two badass millennial ladies talking about rock music our parents wouldn't let us listen to.
As a bonus, you'll even get our beer recommendations at the end.
Find us wherever you listen to podcasts.
And remember, don't do drugs!
All right, that was part 2 of our conversation with Kenny of Earfloss.
We hope you enjoyed. That was so much fun having that amazing conversation with Kenny. If you haven't listened to Earfloss, check out Earfloss, a music history podcast.
Yeah, and let us know what you think about the conversation. If you were at any of the, we talk about a lot of different shows and different venues and different happenings. And if you were, at those things, chime in. We'd be happy to get your thoughts and talk to some other people out there who saw some of the same stuff.
We'd love to get anybody's input at all. Hit us up on all the socials, and until next time.
Yeah, later on.
Peace.